Welcome to another episode of the Future Tech podcast series. It's me, Charlie Sell, the Group MD for Arrows Group, where I'm interviewing, speaking to thought leaders, people who have really built companies or are super passionate about cultures and how we actually make a real difference when thinking about the next generation, aimed at our STEM graduates, obviously, and looking at career advice for that all-important first jobs. So really pleased to have Jamie Cooke with me today. Jamie is the General Manager for Discovery, or is the General Manager for Discovery Communications, I should say, for Central Europe, Middle East and Africa. I'm going to ask him what that actually means in a second, because it's got a pretty nice title to it. And for those people who might not know Discovery, Discovery is a global media company. You would have definitely known of programs that they would have produced and channels that they would have hosted. So yeah, without further ado, Jamie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's jump straight into this, because we're having a joke before, as we've known each other now for probably a couple of years, and your career has just been fantastic through Discovery, and the first question is going to be asking you to talk a bit about it and get to that all-important role that you're in now. I think it sounds fascinating. So over to you. Tell us a bit about your background.
Sure, can do. So let's just start with Discovery first. You sort of did a bit of an intro that we're a global media company. Let me just expand on that a bit. So Discovery was created in 1985 in the US. It was a vision of a guy called John Hendricks. And it was originally conceived as a television channel, Discovery Channel, but I think most people know the brand. And it was really about acknowledging that at that time, most of the content that was on television was really drama, movies, sports. There wasn't something that was about curiosity. And so our company was really formed on this idea of satisfying curiosity. And fast forward to where we are today, we are now a global media company present in over 200 countries. Yes, we have Discovery Channel and other brands like TLC, Animal Planet, etc. in each country. We also own and have gone through a lot of acquisitions over the last sort of 5-6 years into sports. So we've acquired Eurosport, and in countries all around Europe, we've bought into what we call free to air. So this is channels that air not behind the paywall. And so we've done a lot of expansion in Italy, in the UK, in Poland, in Spain, into that free-to-air environment. And recently, in January, we launched our global streaming product called Discovery Plus, which is really the home of real-life entertainment. So we're right in the middle of this disruption as we pivot to a world where consumers are really watching video content on mobile devices or on any screen they need to get their content from. So well, we believe that there's a kind of a unique space for what we do, which is that, as I said, real life entertainment, empowering people's passions. That's a little bit different to what Netflix do or Disney Plus does or other streaming services that are out there. And the early signs are that's working. We've gone from launching in January to having around about 16 million subscribers globally now for our streaming product. So we're heading in the right direction. So where do I fit in that? So I've been at Discovery a long time. I've been here 14 and a half years now. My current role is the general manager for Central Eastern Europe, Middle East, Africa, as you mentioned, which encompasses a lot of countries, a lot of geography. It's about I have about sort of 300-400 people reporting up through to me in 15 different locations across that territory. Offices that vary in size from like 1 or 2 people to 60 people, 70 people in different locations. I also am responsible for our paid television channels. So this would be like Discovery Channel, TLC, etc. Across all of Europe. So yes, the channels that run in my part of the business, but also go into other countries like Spain and Italy and France, UK, etc. We run 66 television channels out of that group across that territory. So how did I get here? I guess that's your question. Like, what's my journey? So let me tell you a bit about my background. I grew up in Devon, in the southwest of the UK. I'm the eldest of 4. My parents were in insurance. They ran their own company. And I just remember growing up in the evenings, they would sort of finish work at 5:30, come home, feed us. And then they'd start work again at about 7 o'clock in the evening, right through to the sort of wee hours of the morning. At least that's my memory. And I always said to myself, I'm not sure I could ever be self-employed for that reason. The thing with Devon is it's a beautiful part of the country. And, I go back there a lot, all my family's there, but there is very little work, to be honest. So I made the decision when I was 18 to go to university. I was the first in the family to go to university. I went to UCL and I studied archaeology. I've always had a passion about the past and really about why humanity continues to repeat the mistakes and repeat the patterns that we've done forever. Yeah. And that's what really drove my curiosity. Plus, I was a big fan of the Indiana Jones films. So I came to London to study, and I knew when I was I loved the subject, and I loved the people and being in the city. And I never really I never really thought that I would make a career out of it though, because I knew that you'd need to stay in academia, and I just thought that wasn't really for me. But it didn't deter me, because I thought that actually learning those skills about, being inquisitive, about patterns, about the past, were going to hold me in good stead, whatever I did. So I left university, and I guess this kind of first phase of my life, I would call it the kind of the wandering years, if you like, because I went to university, as I said, to study something that I didn't really think I would get a job in. That was fine with me. I left university without a clue what I wanted to do, which was fine with me. And I then worked in probably every conceivable job you can think of. I worked in telesales, I worked in bars, I worked in shops, I worked in building sites. I eventually settled on working for a couple of years in a chain of record shops, which is my other passion, music. I was one of the reasons I moved to London was to try to make it as a DJ as well, which failed miserably. But I did do, I've always maintained a passion for music. And so I ended up working for a chain of secondhand record shops in Notting Hill. It was run by a very eccentric guy, and he one day asked me to start working in the office, and I guess that was the first step into what became a career in HR. I didn't know that's what it was, to be honest. I'd never come across that title of HR or knew what that meant, but I found myself sort of dealing with people, whether it be recruitment or figuring out issues that people had with work, with their personal lives, thinking about how the workforce were, who we had in each shop each day, that kind of thing. And so I did that for 2 or 3 years, and then I ended up moving to a fundraising company. And this is my first proper job in HR, I guess. I was hired as a HR manager for a company called Gift Fundraising. And they were a company that raised money for various charities. I think it was over 100 charities. I did my CIPD there, and I started to get a bit more interested in a career in HR. We had to go through a major restructure there in about 2000, and just before I left actually. And it wasn't the same after that. So I had to lead that restructure. The thing about the record store that I worked at and the fundraising company, and this is something that I guess I've held with me along the way, it was all about very passionate people, people who had a real belief in what they were doing, because at the record shops, a lot of people were part-time. Also, they were trying to make it as actors or writers or musicians. And in the charity sector, it was the same, except that these people also had a real passion for the charities they were working for. And so when after that restructure had happened, some of that kind of energy was lost in a way. And so I decided that I needed to make a move, and I applied to a role at Discovery. And frankly, I hadn't really heard of Discovery before then, other than Discovery Channel. And so I walked into this, large media company, and media is not very corporate, by the way. Yeah. However, me stepping into it felt very corporate because I'd never worked in that kind of environment or with that many people. And so I walked into a HR role, a sort of a junior HR role. And I guess this is the kind of end of the wandering years, if you like, because after a couple of years at Discovery, I was definitely coasting. And I was kind of like, I'm not sure I want to be in this kind of environment where there's lots of people you need to influence to get things done. You don't always have a lot of control. or saying things. And there's a lot of processes and rules and things like that. And so I guess you could say I was like a bit of a rebel in a way, in that sense. I was a bit like, I don't know if this is for me. I don't really think I want to be here. And I had a boss at the time, which had a real influence on me, a lady called Nikki Riding. And she basically sat me down one day and sort of said, look, you are talented, but you kind of need to like pull your finger out. You need to decide if you want to do this or not. And so I decided that I did want to do it. And started to kind of throw myself into it. I think the other thing that happened at that time is my father passed away 5 years ago now, and he had MS, and around that time he was starting to get really ill, and so I think that kind of jolted me into thinking, okay, you need to get a little bit more focused on what you're doing, because life passes you by very, very quickly. Yeah. And so I think that conversation with my boss and my dad's situation kind of focused me on that. Plus, I'd met my wife, Lorna, and we had our first child. So it was kind of like okay, it's time to stop that. What are you doing? Phase, if you like. Having said that, and so I started to get promoted and more responsibility from a HR point of view. But that feeling of or big organizations being quite siloed in a way, and you having like a little box to fit in, it was always a bit of a frustration for me throughout my kind of growing time as a HR leader. So I had this thirst for like, okay, I want to do more than just that. I don't want to be pigeonholed into like a very small area. And the main thing for me was, I realized that what's really important to me and what I see, what drives me, I guess, is not the job that I do. I actually don't mind whether I'm the GM as I am now, or a head of HR, or working in a bar or whatever, right? The role's not important. The thing that's really important to me, and this is, I guess, one of the lessons I've learned through my career, is being really clear on what your purpose is. So for me, what I've realized is that the world, and I guess this kind of links back to the beginning of my story around archaeology and interest in the past and patterns, etc. What I've realized is that there's a lot of big issues in the world we're facing now, whether that be climate change, rollback of democracy, you name it. There's a lot of really big, meaty issues that we need to deal with. And unfortunately, there's a lot of negative conflict in the world that stops us really addressing those issues. Don't get me wrong, conflict's good. You need a level of conflict to unstick things and move them forward. But when it's unhealthy, it's just my view, your view, right? And so what I've realized that I'm about is actually helping to reduce that conflict. Now that sounds really grand. I'm not working for the UN as a peacekeeper or something like that, right? But I do believe that actually you have a ripple effect. It's that butterfly effect, right? So everything that I do, whether it be the one-to-one conversations I have with my team, whether it be projects that I work on, whatever it is, I'm always looking for where there's normally a human tension somewhere in those issues, right? And so I tend to focus on that and try to solve that. And so that really links back to my purpose, which is why for me, it's less about the role that I do. It's more about, is there an opportunity for me to reduce that negative conflict in the world, which will help, make things better, frankly. So with that in mind, what I realized was that the HR role was quite narrow in a sense. And I got to a point where we did a major restructure inside Discovery, and there was a split between the Central and Eastern European part of the business and the Western European part of the business. It was like putting a Berlin Wall back up in a way. And there was very good logical business reasons to make that split. And I had a choice whether I wanted to be the head of HR for the Western European division or the head of HR for the Eastern part, if you want to call it that. And I picked the Eastern part, which we called CEMEA, which is Central Eastern Europe, Middle East, Africa. And you'll see there's kind of a neat circle to this because I'm now running that part of the business. At the time, I was the head of HR for that part of the business. I'd made that choice. And I made that choice for 3 reasons, which again, I think links back to lessons that I would give people. So the first was, is there opportunity for me to have my purpose be more present? Yes, because we were dealing with a new business unit, a lot of restructuring, And so there was a lot of tension and conflict in that system. The second thing I took or decided was, will it give me the broadest possible experiences beyond the narrow focus that my current role has? And it absolutely did, because it was like working in a startup inside a big organization. So there was no real infrastructure. We didn't have any people. So where we are today, we're sort of 300 people in these 15 locations. At that time, there were 30, and the rest of it was run out of London. And so, what immediately happened was there were offices that needed opening. So I suddenly got well versed in real estate. There were bits of the business where we had gaps in recruitment because we hadn't hired leaders yet. And so I was asked to lead functions that weren't my background. And so my second lesson was sort of, okay, does this give me breadth that I'm not getting at the moment? And the answer was yes. And then the third thing was really the boss. So I connected with my boss. She's a lady called Kasia. She's Polish. She runs all of our EMEA business now. And we just connected on a work level, a personal level. And I knew she had my back, and I knew she would be a sponsor to me. So those three things are major lessons for me. Follow what's really important to you, keep your options open, and find a sponsor. So these were the three things that I was looking for, and I kind of engineered through that move. So that's kind of the end of phase 2, if you like. It was, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm wandering around. I'm doing all sorts of jobs. Phase 2, I'm in HR. I'm building a career. I've decided to go for it in a corporation, but it doesn't quite feel wide enough. Transitioning into what this third phase was. So the third phase, and kind of where I am now, which brings the story full circle, if you like. So I took a role, over a couple of years, we were building the business. I'd taken on more responsibility. So I had HR for all of the EMEA region, and I had some communications functions reporting to me. I had research reporting to me, etc. So it started to broaden out. And then again, we went through a major change, and my boss was given a larger role. She asked me to help her figure out what the organization looked like. And we identified that at that point, this is going back sort of 3 years now, that there's a lot of disruption in the company because of the digital transformation that's happening in the media landscape. Plus, there was a lot of chaos because of what's happening in the world generally. And we realized that when in those moments, people's reaction is to generally, not always, to kind of close ranks. So you go, okay, when it's all chaotic and I don't have much control, I'm going to focus on the things that I can control. And what that means in a big organization is you end up with a lot of siloed behavior and thinking. And so we said, that's a problem for us as we step into this new, bigger organization that we've taken responsibility for. And so we said, well, what do you do about that? And my boss said, well, you figure it out. Tell me what you think is needed. And so I said, I did a lot of research, and I said, look, I think you need a role that can help you break down those silos, that can work on projects that go across all these different divisions and parts of your business. And she said, yeah, I think you're right. And so I did a bit more digging and said, look, I think there's a role out there that other organizations have got. Some of them, sometimes they're more administrative, sometimes they're very strategic, which is a chief of staff position. And she said, great, sounds good. Do you want to do it? So I said, okay, let's do that. So for the last couple of years, up until October last year, my role has been chief of staff for our entire EMEA business at Discovery. And so I've worked on, which brings the story full circle, if you like, because again, it's about why do people create silos because of that conflict that I was talking about, that they're fearing those issues they have to deal with because of the chaos that's going on around them. We keep on making that pattern as humans, right? And it was playing out in my organization. And so all that thing, starting right back to the beginning of my story, with that curiosity about why people behave that way, it kind of came full circle. So I found a role where I was able to, work across different divisions, solve problems, help people, move forward in a way.
Yeah.
the last part of the story, which is a short chapter, I guess. So, you know, in October, the new role that I'm in now came about. And I guess for me in my career, I spent a lot of time in roles that were supporting business units. And this was an opportunity to lead a business unit.
Yeah.
And so I decided that's what I wanted to do, and was offered that role. So the role today, as I said, it's the general manager for this region. It's essentially responsible for all of our business across that region. And that's everything from, you know, the commercial deals that we do to put Discovery's content and channels and products out in the market, to the advertising that goes around that, to the marketing that supports that. It's essentially a full-blown P&L general management role.
Yeah.
So that's the bit of a long rambling one, but that's the end of that's the story up to date, I guess.
Well, and thank you for that. I mean, like anyone I'm sure who's listening, you know, it's so interesting when you hear people's journeys, and especially when, like you said, when you start from doing a course totally unrelated, and everyone, I think everyone, I was the same. When you first start a career path, you don't know really what you want to do. Even, you know, I studied accountancy, and that was meant to be my future, and I realized very quickly that wasn't going to be my future. But you've then got to discover, you've got to be open, like you say, and you've got to try things. And you know, the 3 points I've taken from that: having a purpose, having, you know, broad experiences, so keeping your options open, and finding a sponsor. For me, they are 3 really, I couldn't agree with you more, really, really key things for not just graduates. I think that's throughout your career, really.
Totally.
You know, that's what you need to be looking for.
I see so many people who've got, you know, when I had my HR role, you see a lot of people in their career, both in Discovery and outside. I do some work outside of Discovery as well, where I've trained as a coach, and I sit. So I've done a lot of coaching. I also sit on a board of an academy trust of schools, and so I come across people from lots of different walks of life. And you see people in their 40s, 50s, and you know, they're often if you work for a big company, at some point there's a restructure, and they're kind of, you know, they might be at a moment when they are you know, out of a job or whatever, and they're just lost because they're not really clear on what they want. They've just been in that cycle of job, money, promotion, bigger role, etc. Right? And they struggle, and that's, you know, it's not nice to see.
No, and you know, and especially in the most recent, well, I would say over the last 2 years, mental health is such a prominent thing, and it affects everyone in different ways. And obviously work can be a key driver of happiness, but also stress and anxiety. If you find the right role, and you believe in the purpose, not just your purpose, but the company's purpose, it can fulfill you. If you don't believe in it, or it suddenly finishes and you're over, it can cause huge anxiety.
I think I've definitely noticed that through the last 12 months of the pandemic, you know, reality we've all been facing, and that it's true. You know, most of my teams are spread out across various countries. There are a few roles in the UK, in my part of the business at least, and I think it's true of every nationality, every country, that a lot of people are asking that question of, why am I doing this? So they get up in the morning, they move from one place in their house to another place in their house, and they sit on Zoom calls, and they're doing the job, and they're doing a great job. But a lot of people are starting to question, you know, what is this for? Like, why am I doing this job? And I think as a leader, that's one of the key roles that I have, and the other leaders need to play, I think, which is to give people a sense of what it's for, both collectively and individually, and helping people find that reason to do what they're doing. And it's really getting to the answer of that question of why am I doing this, and finding some connection with that.
And again, you know, and what I love about this specific podcast is being able to slightly divert into different topics, and this is a really, really important one to me as well. You know, the why. You know, why are we here? But what drives people, and because a lot of people do the what, and a lot of people tell people what they need to be doing, or how they should be doing things. Very, very few people actually talk about the why, and you need that. You really need that to. And I think especially now with remote working and these Zoom calls, if people don't have the why, they lose that self-autonomy, you know, and we need to trust each other now to have self-autonomy and to be able to do the roles.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely seen that with Discovery. So, you know, when Discovery was founded, as I said, it had this very simple idea of satisfying curiosity. Yeah. And that worked very well, I think, for a moment when you are a business that has a single product or one or two products that are very singularly clear in what they do. I think everyone would say, what's Discovery about? You could probably link it to curiosity. The thing is, we went through a period of massive expansion, right? Both organic and inorganic through acquisition. And suddenly you've got sports or you've got entertainment as part of your portfolio. You know, how does, you know, we acquired a company in the Nordics. How does Big Brother or Love Island, how does that satisfy curiosity, right? So there was this kind of moment in time where we were, I guess, a bit of a crisis of identity, if you like. That's how I felt it, at least. But over the last 2 or 3 years, it's become much clearer again, which is everything that Discovery does is about powering people's passions.
Yeah.
And so that's become like a real purpose for the organization, I would say. But even that isn't enough, because in my part of the division, people can connect with that, but they go, hang on, well, where do we fit into that part of the puzzle? So a lot of what I've been thinking about is what is the specific role that my business unit in the countries that I operate in, what is our purpose?
Yeah.
And how do we get clearer on that? And we're having conversations about, I've only been in the role since October, but it's one of the, you know, after kind of getting through some restructuring and laying down commercial objectives, etc. That's now the conversation we're having. And for me, it's really about saying, you know, in the countries that I operate in, if you look at things like social mobility or access to democracy, etc., they come lower down on the list, right? And so, you know, the opportunity to create roles and opportunities, frankly, for people in those countries to get work in and experience a global organization with, you know, strong values around diversity and inclusion, opportunity to work with, you know, on Zoom calls with people from all over the world. Yeah. That's doing something, right? Because that's showing people that you can move, you can create opportunities. Yeah, so that's kind of where that's going for me around purpose at the moment.
And I love how it keeps coming back to purpose. Again, I couldn't agree with you more. And the company purpose, but then what's more for you? And, you know, and would you believe our time has flown by. This has absolutely been fantastic because it's authentic. And again, you know, when interviewing people like yourself, you can tell when people actually believe what they're saying as well. And for me and for many of our listeners, without overbearing that point, the three things that Jamie talked about earlier that I'm taking from this conversation, you know, if you're going to have purpose, keep your options open and have a sponsor. They're three of those, and they're super important. And you know, you're living proof of being able to navigate through a business that has gone through a lot of change and has had to re-identify itself, like you say, from curiosity to now expanding passions. But you've done it, you've navigated it because you've kept honest to your values. You've been looking for your purpose. You keep your options open, and it's clear you've built really strong relationships and people have got your back. And I can imagine that's exactly what your staff, your direct reports feel about you. And that trust.
I hope so.
Yeah, well, you know, I think it's always nervous when you ask for the 360 feedback, isn't it? And you hope that your perception is as accurate as what people are willing to tell you. But so Jamie, last question, and over the last couple of minutes of the podcast, for our listeners, you know, many of our listeners are graduates about to go into their first opportunities. Have you got one or two bits of advice when you put your interviewing hat on and you're hiring grads? What can they do to help their chances of landing that first job?
I mean, I'm not denying it's very tough out there at the moment, right? To get those first opportunities, I think. And, you know, you hear about people needing to have done internships and all of those things to even get a foot in the door. And I think there's some truth in that. But actually, I kind of go back to to the points that I made earlier, which is be really clear on what you want. Because it is obvious to people when you're not clear and you just want the job. And I know that's hard because you need to find a job, right? But it's about that authenticity, I think. Just you need to bring yourself into that, because otherwise you're going to find yourself either not getting the job because they don't believe you, or you're going to end up getting the job and finding yourself a few years down the line going, why am I doing this? Yeah. And I think the other piece of advice I give people is just be kind to yourself, right? It can feel stressful. You can feel like when you get told no, a lot of times it can feel, like you're being rejected or whatever, but be kind to yourself. You've achieved, you're on the start of your journey. You're clearly well educated and you've got some stuff about you. Just be kind to yourself and don't, keep going. I guess that would be my advice.
Well, what a great way to sign off this podcast, because I do, so clear that you believe that, and it is so true. The couple of years we've had, and many of the graduates, who have not either they finished the college without getting that chance to fulfill the end of year exams or starting uni. There's lots of times now that people can beat themselves up, but you've got to be kind to yourself, and you've got to realize it's a process, and life is a journey. So when one door shuts, the other one opens, and like as you said, from working in record stores and doing every job imaginable to now where you are, through what we discussed earlier, that's possible for everyone if you keep those two things: be really clear what you want and be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up.
Yeah,
fantastic. Well, look, Jamie, thank you so much. That's really enjoyed that. I hope you haven't found that too challenging and enjoyed talking about your story.
Yes.
Great. And for all our listeners, that is another episode of our Future Tech podcast series. The podcasts are on our landing page, arrowspodcast.com. They're also embedded into the career portals of our now 18 university partners, and on Spotify, Google Play, and Amazon. So here's to another episode, and see everyone next time. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Future Tech with Charlie Sell, a podcast from Arrows Group Global. Please subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode. Arrows Group is a global technology recruitment and workforce solutions provider who focus on people at the heart of all our interactions. With in-depth technology expertise and global candidate communities, we offer bespoke solutions to every client and candidate. To find out more, visit arrowsgroup.com.